Okay, thank you, and welcome to the third part of today's research festival here at ACM Birmingham. At this point, I would like to thank everyone who's presented so far and has contributed in any way, including the technical teams who have made this all happen. I really hope you've been enjoying the session so far. The projects here in Birmingham shift the focus towards the wider conditions surrounding creative practice, particularly questions of access, structure, and sustainability.
So across this afternoon's presentations, we'll see research into the underrepresentation of women in the music industry, exploring both the causes and potential systemic responses, which should be very interesting. And then we'll be pivoting to a project on game development that proposes a more integrated system-based approach to creative production, challenging fragmented ways of working. There will also be a strong focus on the social impact of creative work. And one project explores how live music and karaoke can support well-being in elderly communities, while another looks at vulnerability in performance and how it shapes audience connection. We shall also be looking at where that addresses the practical realities of creative careers. We have students who've looked into bridging gaps between education and industry in visual effects training, as well as exploring funding models that could support independent musicians outside traditional label systems.
Together, these projects highlight how creative work is shaped not just by what is made, but by the conditions around it, and how these conditions can be rethought and reframed.
So first up this afternoon, we have Noah, and Noah is going to be talking about how vulnerability affects an audience and how can an artist use it for promotion, which I'm sure you'll agree will be very, very interesting. So Noah, if you want to come to the stage.
Oh. Hello. So my project is going to be focusing on how vulnerability affects an audience and how an artist can use it for promotion. So what will I be researching? So I'm going to be looking at the different ways in which emotional and vulnerable music affects a crowd and an audience while they're witnessing it, and the current industry trends surrounding listening room style events. I'll also be looking at how these events appeal to fan bases and listeners, and then I'll also be going into looking at music for therapy and community building. Why am I researching this? So I am a singer-songwriter myself, and I've been performing as a musician for probably like the last 10 years now. And during that time, I have noticed that it is quite difficult to perform softer and slightly more emotional music to crowds and find, that they're entertained. People tend to want more upbeat music, so that kind of makes it difficult for performers like myself to actually perform the stuff that they've written. So I want to try and develop a way for artists to experience and host exclusive events where they're able to perform their original music to audiences in a listening room style kind of thing, which is usually mostly like accessible for bigger artists as well. So you see like Spotify listening rooms and stuff. So I want to try and do it for smaller artists. And also, is there a way to utilize this for promotional purposes? And I also want to try and connect this research project with my ideas into action as much as possible, so it's all like one big thing. How will I go about researching this? I'm going to be doing a participant-based survey, which will be carried out at the listening room event that I'm going to be holding in June. But in the meantime, I'm going to be doing online research, looking at different articles and pre-existing events that have happened, like my own. And then I'll also be looking at current statistics within the music industry, which are connecting to economy, well-being and community. And then I'll also be looking at how music for therapy can help artists and listeners as well. So far, I've managed to write the survey. I am currently in the process of trying to get the data collection and looking at different articles and doing my research. I have booked for a listening room event as well. And I've also managed to collect like the amount of participants for the survey that I want to get. So that's going well. With the survey, I've got questions on here. It's going to happen in two parts. So the first part will be focusing on the actual music, where I'll be asking the audience how the songs performed would make them feel, and also what other kind of music that they listen to as well. And with this kind of survey, I'd also look to carry it into future listening room events that I'll be looking to host with other artists. And then the second part of the survey will be focusing on the event in its entirety. So I'll be asking about whether or not it encourages them to listen to the artist more. Even questions like, do they prefer sitting or standing at these kinds of events? Like, how did the atmosphere make them feel? And this could potentially shape how this event itself would work if I were to hold it again. And yeah, this will all be conducted on June the 10th. When it comes to the ethical considerations, I did have to, initially I was planning on doing like a QR code survey thing, but due to the ethical considerations of it being held at this, like I'm doing it at the event, I'm now collecting my participants beforehand so I can get their consent and get all that sorted. The questions themselves won't have any sensitive material either from myself or asking for the participants to share sensitive information too. None of the staff at the venue will be participating in the survey, and also all the participants will be briefed on the context of music being performed as well, so they know what they're getting into. And so far I've been, with my data collection, I've looked at artists who've done a similar sort of thing, so Billie Eilish, Rosalia and Kanye have all done it. Theirs have been like a lot bigger, so they've got like massive stadiums where they normally just play their music and everyone kind of listens to it, whereas mine will be more like a live event. And I also was looking at how music impacted performers and listeners over lockdown. So I think that they found that it was like people who engaged in a music activity for 30 minutes a day during lockdown that really massively helped improve their mental health, which kind of shapes and connects back to the music that I do. And yeah, just generally the power of music within health sectors and how these things can help build a community. And yeah. Has anyone got any questions? Thank you.
1, 2. There we go. Thanks, Noah. Well done for going first. So, yeah, I really like the idea and the concept behind your project. So I just thought that maybe something that's an interesting angle could be that of the kind of like listener behaviour and their kind of interaction with the music that you're putting forward, because you're making a kind of definition about the type of music that these events will be, the type of music that will be performed at these events, right? So in the past, we've talked about the kind of intimate nature of these things and the kind of the content of the music and that kind of thing. So I'm just wondering, maybe as part of that, secondary research could be informed in some way by like listener behaviour, changes in listener behaviour, because you mentioned lockdown, and people have seen that has changed the way that crowds behave, but also the way that, as you highlight, how people are listening or engaging with these kind of alternative ways of appreciating music or seeing live music. So I'm wondering if that could be an interesting angle to look into. The other thing that you mentioned is about bringing up questions around how music makes you feel, and I think that that's an interesting, very large kind of Pandora's box of a question, because you need to kind of define how people are experiencing the music and what it is that they're actually feeling, which can be a range of different things. So again, I think that could be like an interesting angle for you to look into, to try and understand a little bit about what types of feelings people have reported as when in a listening environment, because kind of part of what makes music engaging or live performance engaging is that you're in a shared space with other people and experiencing it all together. So I guess they're not technically questions, but wondered whether you'd thought of those kind of angles and maybe they could be something interesting to look into alongside what it is that you proposed already.
Yeah, that definitely sounds like something I could look into to help strengthen my research. Awesome, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Noah. You spoke of a few things there. Obviously, the performance side of things, also some mental health points, and some audience behaviour. where's the triangulation of these different points from your perspective? Where's the focus of the project going to be?
Sorry, I'm a bit on the spot with that.
It's okay.
Can I take some time to think about that, if that's
Sure.
okay?
I mean, if you haven't thought about it, maybe
Yeah.
my point is perhaps just be careful that you have a focus, I suppose. You can always go down this path and find it as you go, but the end point I would suggest needs to have the focus, because those individually are all very big areas to look into, aren't they? They could be. So, you know, all good stuff, but
Yeah.
that's what I'd say.
Cool, thank you.
Do you have any audience questions? No? Okay, well, thank you very much.
Great, thank you.
Okay, moving on to our next presentation. This one is a video submission from Tian Lloyd, and this is going to be looking into women in music, addressing underrepresentation in the creative industries.
Hello, I'm Tian, and I'm on the music business pathway based at ACM Birmingham. And today I'm going to be talking to you about a topic that is very important to me and the future of the music industry. This project is called Women in Music, Addressing Underrepresentation in the Creative Industries. When we think about the music industry, we usually think about artists, the people on stage, or the names we see on streaming platforms. But much less attention is given to the people behind the sound, producers, sound engineers, and technical professionals. And within those roles, women are still significantly underrepresented. Just 5.9% of producing credits were held by women in the charts in 2025. So this project focuses on a part of the industry that's often overlooked, but really shapes what we hear, production and technical roles. I believe that a potential way forward is creating more roles for women to reduce biased hiring processes. This is one of the main motivators for my project, a comprehensive business plan for an all-female record label, providing more of these roles to talented women and supporting those women in their professional journeys. There's been growing conversation around gender equality in the music industry, which is really positive. But a lot of that conversation tends to focus on the performers rather than what's happening behind the scenes. What really interested me was this gap. Why technical and production roles remain so male-dominated, even as the industry appears to be becoming more inclusive. It will also be interesting to investigate what systems are behind shaping the idea of masculine and feminine roles and what makes them so different. Goals and aims. Overall, this project aims to explore the structural factors that contribute to that imbalance. More specifically, I'm looking at things like barriers to entry, how opportunities are assessed, and how gendered assumptions around technical ability might shape people's experiences. I'm also interested in how education links or doesn't link to actual industry opportunities. I also want to examine the prevalence of female representation within different roles in the music industry, focusing on technical and production-based roles. I aim to gather first-hand perspectives from these industry professionals, including women working in the music industry and individuals occupying roles where women are underrepresented. I am to identify perceived barriers and structural industry challenges that may contribute to gender imbalance within certain sectors and musical education pathways. And this is all to explore potential strategies and initiatives that could support increased participation and representation of women in these underrepresented roles. Methodology. My primary research follows two specific paths to form a mixed methods approach. I'll be conducting 4 semi-structured interviews with women of different disciplines within the music industry. This is to collect qualitative data using observational and perception-based questions. I will be using this data to inform my business plan structure and dissertation. Observational survey. This will be distributed to musicians via social media. This research will provide quantitative data and will help inform my market research for my comprehensive business plan. So far, some early patterns are starting to emerge. One main thing is that underrepresentation doesn't seem to come from a singular issue. It's more a combination of smaller structural factors. For example, 37.7% of musicians in 2024 in the charts were women. And in terms of roles, 79% of women are performing musicians, but are still significantly underrepresented as engineers, producers and DJs, with 5.9% of producers in 2025 charts being women. It was also found in USC Annenberg's study that just 4 out of the 871 participants were both women of colour and producers. This in itself shows it's also a matter of diversifying the music industry in terms of both gender and culture. Education also plays an important role in limited female representation, which carries into the professional field, where gate-kept roles such as programmers, promoters and A&R representatives are male-dominated. The problem is overall a structural issue. My project and my goal is to find methods to break down those barriers and develop techniques in which they can be built back up, but stronger and more diverse than before. Theoretical direction. I'm starting to think about this through ideas around structural inequality and access, rather than individual choice. So instead of asking why aren't women entering these roles, it becomes more about what systems are shaping who gets in and who stays in. I'm also drawing on feminist perspectives that look at how certain types of work, like technical roles, become gendered over time. I will also be looking into what makes a good initiative. I see this project being informative and contributing a unique perspective to the already existing data. I'm excited to see where this project goes and everything that takes shape over the coming months. Project challenges. While it's been relatively smooth sailing so far, there have definitely been some challenges and some more on the horizon. Some challenges I've faced so far include finding academic sources and gaining full access to them, I combat this by talking to our wonderful librarian Chelsea, who helped me gain access to a resource I was unable to access. I also struggled with finding different perspectives because many of the existing research studies go into educational based issues and identify issues very narrowly rather than looking at the whole picture and looking at everything structurally. I also struggled to find a way to make my research non-personal and more industry-based, as this topic's very important to me and I'm very passionate about it. So it was kind of difficult to not kind of put my own personal spin on things. I did find a way around this by looking more at the structure rather than personal experiences. Some challenges I see coming up in the future are balancing individual experiences and perceptions with broader patterns without overgeneralising. I think it'd be a challenge because I need to identify whether the industry is actively shifting or whether the conversation around women music is moving faster than actual reality. I think that'll come into play quite a lot when it comes to my primary research because I need to look at the facts and the data as well as observations and perceptions of the professionals that I'm interviewing. So at this stage, I think it would be really valuable to get feedback on a few things. So I want to find out whether my focus feels clear and specific enough, if there are any theoretical perspectives you think that would strengthen my project, and whether there are any areas or angles you think I might be overlooking. Ultimately, this project isn't just about representation, it's about access. Who gets to be in the room? Who gets to shape sound? And whose voices are heard behind the scenes? Because those decisions don't just affect the industry, they affect the music we all listen to. Thank you.
Well, that was brilliant. I thought it was very, very insightful and gave a really good, clear overview of the research areas and all of the relevant stuff with regard to this particular topic, which the feedback that you've asked for as well is important because it is a big topic and there's lots of different ways that you can look at it. So I was wondering, you were kind of talking about the conversation moving faster than actual kind of changes in the industry, and I think that's a really very salient point in the kind of areas of the industry that I've been working in or kind of have more experience. You've seen kind of shifts in policy, and that is a good thing on paper because it should try to address those kind of more structural issues which you identified. But yeah, it could be an angle for yourself to kind of see or to look into how much of a difference such policies have made. So things such as like ethical riders, and an ethical rider is where an artist is basically going to be putting it onto promoters to ensure that they have a diverse list of artists who are performing, and so that the artists will be representative of the kind of wider society, men and women, etc. How much of a difference does that make? Is that something which is really forced about a change? But it is a kind of longer potentially a longitudinal approach which is needed to kind of identify how these approaches have changed or made a shift in the industry. So I think it's easy to maybe just anecdotally suggest that it is, but at the same time there's data there which you could uncover and you could look into and get a better idea and understanding of that scenario. Again, I thought it was really interesting that what leads into industry. Well, it's education, and that's where we sit. And so it's quite right to maybe hold up the mirror to institutions such as this and to think about how roles are gendered, and how what it is that we do feeds into that, because I think I don't know whether enough of that is happening. And again, this is where the project that you present is very very much needed and really interesting as well. The feminine perspective of all these kind of things, I think, is again a really good perspective and framework for you to make use of, because I think, as you've identified, there's more into how it is that we understand the nature of these roles and these positions, and who deems themselves to be appropriate, who gets access to these kind of these jobs, and so there's a lot of work there, and that's the tricky thing. How do you kind of like find a way to navigate within the kind of constraints of the project that you have and the time that you have? But I think you probably have a project here that could see you go much further into research, and so as a starting point, I think this is some really, really interesting stuff. So hopefully there's some valuable feedback somewhere in that monologue, but thank you for bringing the research today, and it's definitely a very big contribution to the subject, which is much needed, so well done.
Thanks, Joel. I think it's a really interesting project. I'm going to echo a lot of the things that Joel said, in truth, but it's potentially a huge project, So I think, with regards to your question, is it focused enough? It can be, most definitely, and it might be one of those where your initial research, your qualitative research, allows you to find the focus of exactly where you want it to be. As you say, is it that the industry is resisting the action that's already been taken? How effective has it been so far? Those kind of things. I also picked up on the point that John mentioned around the conversation moving faster than reality, which I thought was a lovely way of saying it, actually. And finding out, uncovering what actually is happening in that respect, I think in itself would be a very, very interesting piece of research. It's something ACM has spoken of before. We used to have a women in production workshop. I'm not sure we still do that. But it's those kind of institutional level actions which can instigate change as well, from education perspective. And I'd love to see that kind of angle in your research as well. And of course, where it leads, because as Joel said, it starts with the education path, doesn't it? But generally, I think that's it could be a much bigger project than it already is, and which is a great thing. It sounds like you're shooting for the stars, which of course is always great to see. So well done. Are there any questions or comments from the audience on this one?
So thanks, Slav, for the question in the chat. Tian is actually in the chat as well. So she probably has seen this, but just for kind of just to make sure this is included. How are you going to take into account the potential impact of the personal attractiveness of these roles for women in various ways, e.g. work-life balance, general interest, etc.? And Tian has responded, just for those of us in the room. That's a very good question. I'm still trying to figure out these details, but I'll be doing my primary research with some women in industry who I'm sure will help provide insight. Yeah, definitely, of course. Thanks, Ben, and thanks, Tian, and thanks, Slav, for the question as well. So, round of applause for Tian, everybody. Okay, so next up we have Daria Kaban. And this is one of the great things about the ACM Masters, is that we have people coming from all different angles, looking into the creative sector from a number of different directions. So this is a great example of that. Daria comes from a gaming background, working in the games industry. And she has been developing the game development table. And although I'm not kind of working in close proximity to this project, I believe is a kind of framework for game design and development, which I'm sure she will elucidate in much greater depth coming up. So here we go.
Hello everybody, my name is Daria. I'm a game designer and also a master's student, and here's my project. It's called the Game Development Table. So what's the problem that I'm trying to solve here? There are actually many, but I've decided to highlight this one. Game development knowledge is often fragmented across disciplines such as design, programming, art, marketing, production, etc., which limits holistic understanding and collaboration within those disciplines. The Game Development Table addresses this issue by organizing these components into a single interconnected framework that supports analysis, idea generation, and systems thinking. Here's what it looks like right now. I know, a bit intimidating, but don't you worry. I already have a solution for this, which I'll show you later. But for now, let's talk about the core elements. We have the core gameplay, audio, art, asset construction, animation, narrative, player segment, technical, development, production, task planning, and marketing. We also have little subsections and little descriptions of what these subsections mean, and even more subsections underneath. But this is not user-friendly, right? Like, this is not something that a student would use, let's be honest. That's why I've decided to create free versions of the websites. Here's the first one. This was the first one I've ever made. It has a little feedback form because, of course, I want this to be a community project. I want people to interact with it. I want them to show me the gaps. I want to improve it as much as humanly possible. I mean, yes, it does its job. Me personally, I don't like this. So I decided to create a second one. A bit more techy, futuristic, speaks to my target audience, who are indie game developers, students and beginners, educators, industry professionals, research-driven players, and gamers. I've created a little mind map which shows what they want from my table and how my table responds to their needs, and also what are their shared motivations right here. Yes, a bit better again, but not quite it. And here's my latest version, which does all the same things as the previous ones. It just looks a bit more structured, less chaotic. You can see core gameplay, audio, art, narrative, asset construction. You can also see references just in case some student finds this website and he's like, okay, I need a backed up information. Let's have a look. And you have a list of nice references, academic, not written in 500 years ago. So it's all good. It's all good. All right, let's move on. This is also what I need your feedback on. I want you to tell me which version you like better. Where can I improve? If this even works, right? So yeah, we'll discuss this later. Perfect. Okay. So what my current project focus is: gathering community's feedback from developers, designers, and learners to evaluate the usability and clarity of the framework, improving the project's website to better present the framework, explain its purpose, and make a tool easier to explore. Testing how users interact with the table when analyzing games and generating ideas. Of course, we already covered this slide right here. And so what are my key challenges? ensuring the framework remains intuitive and accessible, despite the complexity of game development systems. I'm still thinking on how I will manage users' feedback, right? Because you can expand on it infinitely. So this is what I'm currently trying to figure out, how I want the community to interact with it, how I want to gather feedback, where I want to receive this feedback, which is also really important. I don't want it to be, just spam with empty answers. So yeah, I also communicating the value of the tool clearly, so users understand how it differs from existing design frameworks. What I wanted to say is that I'm not a competition to already existing design frameworks like mechanics, dynamics, aesthetics, MDA, or level design book. I'm working with them. We're working together to better the industry, to better next generation of developers, and to better games, right? Yeah. All right. Also, maintaining engagement from the wider game development community during feedback collection. Key questions moving forward. Does the framework help users understand game development systems clearly? Can it effectively support idea generation and creative experimentation? And what improvements are needed for the tool to become more practical for real users? And how can the website communicate the framework in a clear and engaging way? That's it. Thank you so much. If you have any questions, hopefully I'm in the call and I'm ready to answer them.
Thanks, Daria. Oh. Thanks, Daria. Yes. Right. So I really like the idea of the framework, and in terms of my website preference, I think I would err on the side of option 3, although option 2 was also aesthetically pleasing. But yeah, it would be good to kind of, have a be able to have a look at the website and have a poke around and kind of, get into a little bit more detail about what information is presented there. And just, for example, you brought up the use of references, and it'd just be kind of interesting to sort of see, where that information is kind of meeting the references and how that's been used as part of your content. The kind of scope of the project, I think, is really interesting, and can definitely see the value for the users that you mentioned, especially from a kind of educational standpoint. Being able to kind of understand and to foresee the kind of different stages of the game design process and all of the different aspects which go into that, I think is going to be really beneficial. I just wonder, in the context of kind of research, what is and how can research inform your output here and your approach? How could it be utilised to kind of to improve the output overall? And I'm wondering whether that is with regards to the use of frameworks overall, or kind of understanding ways that frameworks can support kind of long form projects of this nature. It's a tricky one because it's not specifically my background, but designing a game, coming up with a game is obviously a very complicated process, and there's involving such a huge number of moving parts. So a framework of this nature could be really, really beneficial. I can see a kind of very streamlined and clear and concise framework of this nature being useful in that context. So I think my kind of main question would be, how does research inform your approach? How can it be fed into the overall development of the project, both secondary and primary? You mentioned about the use of user feedback, and if there's a way that you can be very specific about the kind of cohort of users who are going to be providing that feedback, beta testing, all of that kind of stuff, could be really beneficial in a product of this nature. So yeah, really excited to see how this develops, because I can really see, even from my perspective, the value that something of this nature would have for industry. So thank you for sharing.
Thank you, Daria. Yeah, I think my comments were about methodology as well. It's a very interesting project, I have to say. I'm a big fan of frameworks in general. But I don't know too much about the game industry. But with regards to methodology, yeah, I was thinking as well about, I'd like to see a bit more information about how you intend to integrate, particularly the primary research, into your iterative approach, which I really like, by the way. I like the fact you've shown us the iterations so far. I'd be interested to know whether they themselves were based on any feedback. I'm not sure you mentioned that. Or whether that was just, it seemed like that was more your perspective and what you were thinking about the iterations. But the iterative approach I very much like, and I think, again, as Joel has mentioned, really, what I'd be interested to see is your plans for your methodology and how you would integrate the research into what would be your final result. Similarly, have you considered any potential barriers or challenges you might have into acquiring those participants or stakeholders in your research? I'm sure you have considered those things, but if not, it might be something worth considering. But generally, I really like it, and I look forward to seeing more of it. I'll ask again, do we have any audience participation? No?
We've got one from Slav.
Okay.
A question in the chat on YouTube. This is from Slav, who is one of our gaming tutors who specialises in art and animation. Slav says, have you researched or are you planning to explore existing attempts to create such a framework in the industry, or examples of software that aim to solve this problem? Yeah, that's a really interesting point, thinking about kind of the context of the industry with regards to this kind of tool, I think is going to be a really beneficial perspective. So yeah, good question there, Slav. I do think we have Daria in the chat working under a pseudonym in this instance, so I'm not sure if she's responding to this question right now, as the chat is live, but yeah, really interesting point there, Slav, so thank you for that. So anyway, round of applause for Daria, everybody. Okay, so I would gives me great pleasure to welcome Daria to the stage in what is set to be a really interesting presentation here. It's live music and karaoke for emotional well-being in hospice settings. So thanks, Daria. Take it away.
Music is one of the few things that can still reach people when other means of communication fail. I'm Daria, and my project explores how live music and karaoke session can influence emotional well-being and social interaction in hospice settings. In hospice environment, care is mainly focused on physical needs, but some residents can also experience isolation, boredom, and emotional distress. So my project looks into how to create more meaningful and enjoyable experience, especially through something as accessible as music. Music is particularly powerful because it can trigger memories, improve mood, and create a sense of familiarity. It also works with people with cognitive declines, where a familiar song can bring them especially strong emotional responses and can create moments of connection. So my project aims to design a live music and karaoke style session where I'm encouraging participation in a relaxed and low pressure way. It's not really about performance or singing well, but more about creating a safe environment where people can participate as much as they want to. My project is quite developed at the moment, and it's going towards the implementation part of it. So, so far I've completed initial research on music and well-being. I've secured a hospice location. I've booked a meeting with the lead nurse over there, and I've also obtained ethics approval. I've identified stakeholders, and I designed a pre- and post-event questionnaire. The next steps would be conducting the meeting with the lead nurse, distributing consent form and pre-event questionnaire to the residents, and they gather their responses. Those responses will then will help in making the song selection. I will finalize the event date and structure, securing necessary equipment, rehearse with collaborative vocalists, and provide lyric sheet and song request list for the residents. So far, there are a few things that have stood out. Firstly, familiar songs are more efficient than new ones. Secondly, participation doesn't have to be active. Even small reactions such as tapping along or smiling can become meaningful. Not lastly, the atmosphere is more important than the performance itself. It just has to be safe, informal, and enjoyable for them. At this point, the direction of my project is a practice-based approach where the event itself can become part of the research. I'm also looking into the idea of co-creation where the residents can influence their experience through their choices and response. There are also challenges I will probably more likely to face, which is measuring the impact on well-being, making sure the accessibility is available for all residents with different needs, and also how structured the whole event should be. There are also ethical considerations when working in hospice settings. I would appreciate feedback on whether the scope feels realistic enough, how can I better measure impact, and how to improve the event, the overall event format or directions. Overall, the whole goal is more likely to create something that is meaningful and human rather than functional. Thank you for your time. I would appreciate your feedback.
Well done, Daria. So I'm just looking at the stream because I want to remember what it was that you were looking for feedback on. But I managed to make a few notes. So I think the project is really interesting because there's a few kind of like different strands of research that could be beneficial, that can really inform, the way that you go about what it is that you propose. And that's, understanding the nature of music therapy, I think, and group therapy at the same time, but also, the nature of, or how, the physical activity, singing, how that's going to be of benefit to your participants. So getting across those kind of different areas can help to inform the delivery, the content, which is one of the things that you mentioned about wanting feedback on. So I think that, if you can become an expert and, just get across the research in those areas, that could be really helpful. And then you also mentioned about how to measure impact. And I think this is another point when looking at the existing research is going to be really beneficial, because you can then, look at the methodologies that other people have used, understand, how you can, thinking about kind of valence, right, which is a sort of a term which is about mood. I'm probably not providing a great definition, but on a scale of, like, I think we might have spoken about this before,
Yeah.
but what's the difference between the different kind of moods that people could suggest? You give people the option to describe their experiences, but also use points of data that you can also kind of like you can look at both of those and come to a kind of better conclusion as to kind of what the impact has been and how people have enjoyed the event. So what was my other point? I did have another one. I think it's really, it's great that you're going to be able to put on an event whereby you can actually use that to, the kind of practice-based nature of the event is totally appropriate. So just to kind of go back to my initial point, I'm wondering whether, how comfortable you might be, but, is movement going to be something that you will maybe, try to introduce, just to add some structure in there, just to kind of like, encouraging participants to kind of, to be moving, or in some way kind of, engaging that part of, as part of your delivery. And I think could also be an interesting angle as well, the kind of benefits of some kind of physical activity alongside the music and the group engagement and all the rest of it. So I think it's a great project, and I think something that you'll find ultimately really rewarding, as well as really insightful as to kind of how powerful music can be in a situation like that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Daria. It's clearly an interesting project. It's with regards to the scope of the project, I think it's quite tricky to answer that question, because it really depends on where you're going with it, I think. You've mentioned your initial research is well-being and mental health, I think you said. But that, of course, in itself is a huge field. So I think the scope could be huge. It could be narrow. I think it depends where you go with it. And of course, with regards to the impact of the event, I'm wondering if you've considered, as part of your analysis, things like behavioural analysis, or taking observational analysis of what's happening in the room. I don't know what your thoughts are specifically about how you're going to measure the impact of it. But I think there's an option there to take quite a holistic approach to measuring what's actually happening. But again, I think it depends on what your final output, what you want it to be, what your initial research is, and those kind of things. But that's, I think, what I would suggest. I really like the practice-based approach to it. And of course, you have to balance it with the traditional kind of primary research. But I think, again, it really depends on the exact focus you're taking there. But I think there's a lot of potential here to do something really, really good. And I look forward very much to seeing what you do with it and where you take it.
Oh, thank you.
Do you have any questions in the stream or in the room?
Not so far.
Great. Am I closing this or?
Don't worry, we'll sort that out. Thanks, Daria. Okay, so this will be our last presentation for today. Last but by no means least, I welcome Shireen to the stage. Shireen is going to be talking about how does live performance help artists improve their career in today's creative landscape. So, yeah, give it up, Shireen.
Thank you. Hi, so as you said, my name's Shireen, and for my 702 applied research project, I'll be researching into the question, how does live performance help artists improve their career in today's creative landscape? My final outcome is to eventually create my own open mic event, so I thought it'd be useful to research into why and how performance can impact artists' career progression. So what is my research about? This project explores how live performance supports emerging artists' career development within today's creative landscape. In my project, I aim to focus on how live performances have proven to promote confidence building, networking opportunities, collaboration between artists, and visibility and promotion through performance, all proven by researching similar case studies to my event. Okay. But why? Why did I choose to research into a topic that is saturated and heavily researched already? As a musician myself, I find it hard to find platforms to perform and share my music on that aren't already community-based and have a community established around it. It can also be a little bit daunting walking into a space that already has relationships built and many people have already networked in. Many creative spaces today have been around for a while. As an artist, I haven't seen new platforms and stages to perform on. So I wanted to help people like myself find these spaces and improve their creativity. This is why I wanted to make my own open mic event promoting community and inclusive spaces. So researching into the creative landscape of live performance and what makes a successful live performance and its positives and negatives is imperative to completing my goal successfully. So my project aim is to use this research of artist experiences and industry insight to design an inclusive open mic event supporting artists. So this project uses a practice-based research approach. The methods I will use to conduct my research include primary research. So I'll be questioning emerging artists through questionnaire to gain insight on their wants and needs for their career progression and what will enable that. Artists' experience insights. I'll also be interviewing artists like myself about their experiences on past live performances and using this research to determine positives and negatives in the live performance space. Additionally, I'll also be interviewing normal music consumers on how they listen to their favorite artists and what would help them make them more accessible. I will also be using secondary research. For my secondary research, I'll be analysing the music landscape to help answer my question. I'll also be researching into existing open mic platforms to better help inform my own project and show how positives and negatives it's been on the participants' career progression. Lastly, I'll be researching event organisation strategies and frameworks. I am currently focusing on collecting primary research from emerging artists about their experiences performing live, benefits of open mic spaces, and barriers to participation. I'll also be researching how successful community events are structured and promoted. Here's a timeline with the current status of my plans and upcoming deadlines I've set for myself. So, starting from January to February, I was formulating my project ideas and coming up with a problem in the music industry that I could help solve myself through research and my final project outcome. I also focus on finding things like methodologies and starting to find stakeholders. This is drawing into my 702. So we're now in March. So during this time I prepared for this presentation, I've also been researching experiences on live performance, the benefits of live performance spaces, and mapping the creative landscape. I'm also working towards completing my 702 written submission. So from March onwards, I'll be focusing on using my research collected to help better inform my final project outcome. I'll also be organising, reaching out to stakeholders and promoting my event. And finally, my final project outcome, the date when my event will be is to be determined because of my stakeholders. But my goal is to successfully run an event and gain positive feedback from artists and audience members. This will help my research question and how does live performance help artists improve their career, and if it does in the first place. So, while researching so far, I've found different ways that suggest live performance can help artists grow. An example of that is it can improve their musical confidence, improve their social confidence, increase their creative motivation, and help musicians connect with other musicians. These insights will also help shape how I complete my final project outcome for my other subjects. I have also found that I've also found in my early research that live performance isn't just positive, it also comes with its negatives, such as social and performance anxiety. I will be going deeper into this subject and trying to find ways to solve this problem. So challenges. This brings me into key challenges and how I will identify them. One way I will identify challenges in my project is through primary research, asking musicians and non-musicians about the negatives of live performance, identifying ways I can change these challenges. For example, through research, I have found that event organisers have reported difficulty in attracting and maintaining audiences and difficulty in forming new ideas and competing with their competitors. Artists have also reported that they find a difficulty in finding inclusive open mic environments and difficulty finding communities with like-minded artists to collaborate with. These are all challenges and gaps. These challenges highlight gaps within the current live performance landscape that I could possibly fill or solve. So what are my next steps? Next, I plan to interview event organisers and audience engagements and utilise this for my own project. I'll also be conducting research on why people attend live performances and what keeps them coming back. I'll be analysing existing open mic event formats, identifying what went well and what could have been improved, and I'll also be testing elements on my own event structure. I'm currently investigating how to attract and retain audiences and how this can affect the outcome of the event and participants' career progression, how to improve inclusivity within open mic spaces and the positives of this, and how to design an event that stands out from existing formats, showing that it can be innovative and help individuals progress their career. So, I would really appreciate feedback on my research methods, additional primary research approaches I could possibly explore, ways I can make my project more innovative and solve industry problems, also strategies for engagement to help with my final project outcome. So, thank you for listening, and any questions?
Thanks, Shireen. Okay, so I think like the first thing that I would probably want to mention is that across the presentation, you are discussing a lot of different strands of research, right? And undoubtedly, those are all kind of pertinent questions with regards to like what the practical output is going to be, and it's going to help you to understand, you know, how better to kind of put this event on or to develop this brand. But I think with regards to research, so there's kind of like two different hats you're wearing to some extent. You mentioned you're an artist, right? So you have that kind of interest in performance and developing stagecraft and all of that kind of side of things. But the other side of you is that you are music business minded, and this is where the kind of the role of the promoter is coming in. So I don't know whether I'm just kind of, you know, raising that, I think, and just, you know, maybe you might want to reflect a little bit as to kind of whether you're giving yourself too much to respond to by addressing all of those, you know, by kind of like, you know, coming from those two different perspectives. Because one side of things is like, you know, is that kind of initial question is the role of live performance in artist development, right? Stagecraft, and, you know, I mean, the other you also mentioned about kind of performance anxiety, and, you know, again, lots of research written just about that singular topic, right? So, you know, you could come at it from that perspective, talk about kind of confidence building, artist persona. I'm not a kind of, you know, performance definitely isn't my background, thankfully. So, yeah, you know, there's maybe other areas of, you know, themes in this research area that, you know, you can kind of like just hang your hat on and go at it from that direction, just to kind of like make your angle a little bit more singular. So I'm wondering whether that might be, you know, a good just something to have a think about, so that, you know, because what you want to be able to do is create a question that's answerable, that you can respond to, and that, you know, the research that your research can inform, and you can confidently, you know, get an answer to, or at least uncover further questions, you know. So so there is that. You mentioned about kind of I've written industry perspective, and now I'm wondering why I wrote that. Maybe, you know, you talked about emerging artists, but the other side of things is that, you know, if an artist has been on a journey and has got to the point where they can reflect on their experiences and, you know, how live performance has shaped them, that could be an interesting perspective if you haven't considered that already. I don't want to kind of, I've written down social media here, but then, you know, just to kind of bring that up is probably adding another topic that might make it a bit more complicated. But it's a side of things, you know, if you're an emerging artist, then you want to perform live, a big part of, you know, talking about kind of spaces and all that kind of thing. I just think, it's something that wasn't mentioned, and I did say let's try and narrow it down a bit, but it's just another thing to think about if you are taking the perspective of an emerging artist. You know, how do those things kind of intertwine? And so, a lot of really interesting stuff there. But I think my kind of advice and just a question to you is like, you know, how can you get specific about like what how you're going to respond to a research question and you know, be confident in doing so. So all right,
definitely.
good.
Thank you.
Hi, Shireen. And I think I'd agree, in truth. Again, another potentially very interesting project. I am of a performance background, and can speak, as most performers can, to how important performance is, particularly in your formative years of your performance life, how important they are. And I can see you are going for the kind of wider research angle here, and I get that. But I'm really interested in the open mic aspect of it, and it'd be really good, I think, I would potentially think about focusing some of this research. It might be what you're thinking of doing anyway, but focusing it on the very initial stages of that performance life cycle, such as the open mic, and how exactly is that, what's the impact of that. You've got things in there like talking about attracting and retaining audiences. Again, from an industry perspective, a really important point. But will be quite a different proposition in an open mic night to it would be in a 3,000 capacity venue, I would argue.
Okay.
You know, and then you're talking about promoters and their whole gig,
Yeah.
and it becomes potentially again another massive area of research.
Mm.
So it's all good stuff. I think perhaps a little bit of focus, if that is what you would want to do. That's kind of where I thought it was going. I think that'd be really, really interesting. I'd imagine there's probably less research into that angle than others, but I mean, you'll find that out, I would guess.
Yeah.
Those things I would say, and equally, it'd be really interesting to see if in your event, if and how you were to integrate that research. Would you make it visible to participants, for example? Would you make a song and dance about the fact that this particular event has been built on some actual scientific research, you know? Most open mics, of course, they just kind of, from the nature of them, they're very much just open the door, come and play, and that's its appeal. But could you put an event on that's based on more than that through your research? And that in itself would be a very interesting thing. But that's just my musings today. But thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you. Okay.
Anyone? Thank you. Thank you very much. As we come to the end of the Research Festival and indeed the day, it's really been wonderful to have been presented with such a range of projects from both staff, students and alumni, and different approaches to understanding and shaping creative work. Across all three campuses, the pieces of work have engaged with questions of access, sustainability, education and experience as part of a wider interconnected landscape. At ACM, we are recognising research as something iterative, collaborative, and ongoing. As working with uncertainty to test ideas and to open them up to discussion and further collaboration. Thank you to everyone who's presented, supported, organised, contributed and participated today, including the tech teams and the operational teams. And perhaps most importantly, thank you for contributing to a space where ideas can be shared, questioned and taken further. We look forward to seeing where this work goes next at your end of year showcase. Thank you.